It's time for another round of Can Masterverse beat Motu Classics. This time we've got a new hero to go against the Comic-Con exclusive hero. Who will win? Keep watching to find out on this episode of Geek Dad Life. Hero was meant to be the new protagonist for a Motu spin-off series, Powers of Grayskull. The story would be a prequel set in a prehistoric Eternia, aptly named Preternia. The promise of giants and dinosaurs gave the line a lot of potential, but unfortunately the line was canceled before a proper launch. Even though the smaller dinos hit shelves in the US, as well as the two giants, Megator and Titus, in Europe. A prototype was made for Hero, but all anyone saw of him was the picture of that prototype in Mattel's 1987 Toy Fair Guide. In the early days of the internet, unproduced figures were my favorite topic to explore. It was like finding continuations of stories that I thought were long since over. The picture of Hero always captured my imagination with his awesome gold vac metal armor. So when he was announced as the 2009 San Diego Comic-Con exclusive for the Motu Classics line, I was over the moon. Honestly, the fact that they unveiled two deep-cut lore figures like Hero and Wondar is why I decided to go all in on the Classics line and subscribe to the first year of Club Grayskull. Because of this, the Classics Hero has a special place in my heart, and I recently was able to reacquire that very figure for this video. Fast forward 12 years and the new Netflix series Motu Revelation actually brought the character to life in animation for the first time. And now in 2022, we have a Masterverse figure of that very appearance. Now that I have both the Classics and Masterverse versions, it's time for them to go head to head to see which is the best hero. Just a quick reminder that I score on 7 categories: cost, packaging, sculpt, paint, articulation, accessories, and fun factor. Each category is worth 1 point. Whoever ends up with the most points wins. Starting with cost, this category has been an easy win for Masterverse, but a downward trend in the secondary market for Classics has been apparent for the past few months. You can find mock examples for $75 or less. Now, there are 6 variants of the figure: an STC stamp version that has the San Diego Comic-Con logo on his chest underneath the armor. The online sales do not have the stamp. Each version also has the possibility of 3 different gemstones in the staff: green, purple, and red, with green being the most common. Purple and red gems can go for a higher price, but the greens have sold for $35 loose or mock. Masterverse are still around $22, but the huge gaps that used to be present between these two lines is narrowing. For the packaging, I'm torn. I have been giving the win to the Masterverse boxes that have given us some awesome Nate Barch art, but this wave only got Nate's art on the Battle Armor He-Man and Sunman. I know he's a busy guy and can't do every box, but there is a difference in quality. No shame to the artist who did this hero art, Nate's just that good. While the Classics Hero was an SDCC exclusive, his packaging was still just the run-of-the-mill regular packaging. No resealability, no fancy art, nothing. I'm going to give the win to the Masterverse packaging. It's collector friendly, and while it doesn't feature Nate Barch art, it's still a great feature of the packaging and still beats out Classics packaging, which barely has any original art at all. Sculpting is where the Classics line really shines, but I've never been a huge fan of the way they approached armored figures in the Classics line. In a cost-saving move, the armor or figures that had unique sculpting that would require new tooling used a soft plastic snap-on overlay that changed the look of the figure. Placing that over the very muscled chest of the Motu C Buck could look very clunky, and accommodating the ab crunch meant cutting out the bottom of the armor, leaving the figure's belly button exposed. In a cheap move, they simply painted his bare belly gold. They fixed this quirk on later releases, but funny enough, they did the same thing with this Masterverse version. You could say this armor looks like the armor of a Roman guard or something like that, but it does seem a little cheap in hand. The head sculpt of the Classics Hero was always just okay. His stoic face didn't have the big grin of the prototype, and over a decade later, it's kind of boring. The Masterverse, however, has a slightly angry face that I think gives the character more pizzazz and life in general. The armor has slightly less detail than the Classics one, but the clunkiness of the Motu C version is also a problem. You can call me crazy, but I'm going to give the win on sculpting to the Masterverse version. Moving on to the paint, there's really no beating Classics in its heyday. The paint on the Classics Hero is awesome. Would have been great to bring the vac metal gold, sure, but the gold paint they ended up using does look really nice, and all the little paint details throughout the figure look so good and really blows the paintwork on the Masterverse out of the water. There are a few paint apps on the Masterverse figure, but most of the gold is the plastic that they casted it in. And while it looks perfectly fine, it feels a little bland next to the Classics version. Add in all the shading detail that Classics were famous for, and it's not even close. Maybe Mattel could have used the new vac metal technology to take this hero figure up a notch, but they haven't really brought that to the Masterverse line yet. So, the win for paint easily goes to the Classics hero. Moving on to articulation, I noticed the limitations on the Classics hero more than some of the others so far. Mainly because of the inability to really hold his magic staff high in the air like he does in his art, as well as the statue that they had at SDCC the year he was the Classics exclusive. They painted his eyes looking upward, but the antiquated ab crunch and arm articulation really limits the figure's ability to hold his staff aloft. Even without the newer Masterverse hands that cut the articulation in the wrist to allow movement from top to bottom instead of side to side, the Masterverse hero's range of motion is so much more with his rocker ab crunch and double jointed elbow, allowing for far more movement. I haven't always liked the extra articulation they've added to the Masterverse figures, but in this instance, I prefer the modern articulation of Hero to the Classics articulation hands down. For accessories, it is a close battle. I really like the soft goods cape compared to the hard plastic, but I do like the little Grayskull graphic on the back of the Classics one. It's a rare case that I like the extra hands with the figure, as I prefer the more open hand with the Masterverse version, as he did not come with a power sword like the Classics one. Speaking of the Classics version, I love how they added the lore of the Power Sword by making Hero its original owner, and I liked the translucent blue with sparkles. It looks like that Crest toothpaste we had as kids. I do really like the functionality of the new staff, with tight ratchet-like joints that hold the panels that cover the jewel. This allows for a more stable display, while the original one clasps together at the top, but then it kind of flops around once open. But the overall look of the original one is better. It's a tougher choice than I thought it would have been, but the win does go to the Classics version, as it gives us an actual translucent power sword as well as a better looking staff. And last but not least, we have our fun factor category. The Masterverse hero is surprisingly running away with this one. While things were close on cost, packaging, and accessories, the better articulation and better sculpt really pushed this new hero ahead of the Classics one for me. Which is shocking, as this very Classics figure was one of the reasons I went all in on collecting the Masters of the Universe Classics line. But over a decade later, his bulky armor, limited articulation, and somewhat vanilla head sculpt drag it behind this new hero that is simply a more fun figure. With that said, the Masterverse hero wins handedly, with a score of 5-2 in favor of the new Masterverse hero. Do you agree with my takes? Do you think I'm crazy? Let me know down in the comments section below. If you want to keep watching, check out this video. And until next time, hasta luego and goodbye.